Hi, folks. Welcome everyone to the Saturday at Startup. And today we have with us Srinivas Sarkar. Thank you so much, Srinivas, for coming in. And it's going to be an easy conversation around Couple. And before we move ahead, just to give a brief introduction about Srini, he is the co-founder and CEO of Couple. And Couple is an investing app for couples, as the name sounds. And pretty interesting way Srini has raised funding from Entrepreneur First and Y Combinator, top global accelerators. We're going to listen to him and
Hello,
his
hello.
story around how he has built his venture and the problems he has faced. So, Srini, let's begin with a brief background of yours. How did you begin your entrepreneurial journey? What inspired you to become a founder as such?
Okay, yeah, for sure. So I'll keep it brief for now, and I guess through the session we'll get into more depth. Essentially, I came from a college itself, bits where a lot of people were aspiring to start up. So it was kind of always just there in the background, but it really kind of developed when I was working in consulting, which is kind of like the opposite of startups. But our clients were startups, mostly kind of growth stage, Series J, Series I, really late stage startups, but still got really exposed to the whole environment that they had there in the offices and the kind of work that startups were doing and the kind of pace in which they were doing it. And was very interested at some point to join a startup. And long story short, was exploring something in short tech space for about a year, and trying to look for co-founders within my kind of batchmates or hostel mates and things like that. But it was a very difficult thing to do. So finally joined Entrepreneur First, which is, as you probably guys all also know, Shubham is from. And that is where it really became very, very serious because that was a very formal place to find a co-founder. And I think everybody there was very clear that this is no more a side hustle, but we're actually trying to build something full time here. And that's what actually put it up to being a full time kind of endeavor for me personally.
That's amazing. So, any anecdotes from your childhood or from your upbringing, which sort of inspired you to become a founder? Did you ever thought that you'll be co-founder and CEO of a venture funded startup, or how was it like?
No, no, I guess for sure. But I mean, to be very honest, I didn't know about venture funding till I was probably like 23, 24, right? But I instantly kind of grew up in Koramangala third block. For those of you who are familiar with Bangalore, where there are a lot of old tech billionaires who used to stay here, right? So I used to see the Infosys guys kind of houses and things like that, and not so much from like a wealth-thing perspective, but also just from the perspective of that these guys have started their own thing and kind of scaled it so high, and that's very inspiring to kind of grow up seeing, right? So while the exposure in school was about get into a good college and do a good job, I would kind of on the way back per se. So that was kind of one inspiration that was there from back in the day. But it was only I think after college that I really understood, or maybe when I watched Social Network, that what is venture funding and what is like a venture backable business versus a normal business. And the idea was not just to build a venture backable business per se, but to kind of just build a business that made sense and that was something I could do. And it just happened to be something that's venture backable. But yeah, that's kind of how it started off in the beginning.
Got it. Seems like a bottom-up approach altogether. So
Yeah,
let's get
absolutely.
more deeper into it. When we say a venture funded startup right now, funded by YC here as well. But how did you get started with Couple? How did you sort of ideate and came up to a concept that couples can start investing in a particular fashion, which is very different from where the consumers are investing, and sort of build a niche platform for that particular matter? How did this happen in your journey?
Yeah, for sure. So I think first, just to clarify, like our older business model was couples joint investing, but since then we moved to joint payments, right? And our idea is to help couples easily manage their like joint monthly expenses. So how it kind of started off was we were in EF. That was my co-founder and I. EF, as I'm sure you guys probably know, but it's a micro VC and it's an accelerator where you find a co-founder, right? And if the idea makes sense, and then you go ahead from next steps and funding and all of that. So in EF, it was then that I'd actually been exposed to the concept of neobanking through one of our cohort members who was the head of growth at FamPay, which is a teenage neobank in India. FamPay back then was doing extremely well. They raised one of the largest Series A. So it was something that people started to get to know neobanks during that fundraise announcement. And as I spoke to her a little more, what I understood was that clearly there's a need in the Indian market for a more tailor-made banking experience. Like what I believe is, and what we believe back in EF itself is that banking in India is pretty good. People say fintech banking is broken, banking needs to be fixed. I don't think it needs to be fixed at all. I think that banks overall are great, but when you want to tap into like a specific market, like couples banking, for example, or like MSME or startup banking, that's where the standard current account or the standard savings account is not making sense. It's too vanilla, right? People need a little more. For example, couples need to budget together, which probably in a fashion where both people have to see it, both people have to have access to it, things like that, which are not provided in say a traditional joint account, right? For example, or another big example that we see very often, and you guys will start up at some point, right? If you haven't already, that if you open a normal bank account for your current account for your business, you have to kind of compute tax on your own with your accountant and then pay it to the government. Whereas if you go to something like RazorPay X neobank, then it kind of computes tax for you. So things that are like particularly made for a certain market segment that makes life easier for them, right? So that was missing majorly for the couple segment. We saw that joint accounts had not evolved the way couples had, right? Couples were like managing money before they got married. Couples wanted a digital banking experience, but joint accounts were still only for married couples. You had to go to the bank to open one, fill paperwork, all of that, right? So it's like banking overall has kind of gone forward. Fintech has gone forward, but this joint banking piece is still kind of 30 years old. So that's kind of what started the whole idea of building for this market. And obviously, from a very selfish perspective, the couple market is huge, right? So we figured if you're in a big market, we can even be like subpar founders back then and still kind of do something, right? So having a being in a good market makes sense, especially since we were first time founders. So we can obviously capture some part of it, and it's big on its own. So that's kind of what started it. Got exposed to neobanking. As a somebody got exposed to neobanking, saw that neobanking makes the most sense for vertical markets. And we saw that the couples problem is huge, as well as it's a very active problem for couples. So we went ahead.
In most of the cases, the ideation starts from scratching our own niche, right? Let's say, for an example, while building multiple startups in my early days, I realized this pain point that it's very difficult to start up something in India. So startup came into the picture that can we help the early stage founders help, right? So in your case, was it something like in your relationship, you figured that a need is there to build something like Coupl where the partners can invest together or sort of pay together in the fintech space, or how was it? Just to understand that context as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. The number of times been asked this question, but no, absolutely right. I think firstly, this was a kind of a problem that both my co-founder and I, back then we weren't co-founders. We were just kind of discussing this, that we both kind of faced, right? Through very different lenses. Like he was about to get engaged that time. He was, I think, about 6 months 6 months away from his engagement, and it was kind of like an arranged marriage kind of a thing as well. So he had a very kind of clear idea about, okay, this is how we need to manage money together, and this is how we will plan it. Whereas for me and for a bunch of people that I know, it was very much how do we kind of get into doing this together? Because tomorrow, when I get married or when someone gets married, we'll have shared bills. You need to buy things together, things that probably is not just your own purchases. You can't be doing splitwise all the time with everything, nor can you just leave it to, hey, we're in a romantic relationship, no one's going to count money, right? So there should be a midway that doesn't make it too mechanical and kind of takes the spark out of it, or it can't be too much like just in the air that 10 years later you start regretting it. So that's kind of our personal journey. But overall, I think to kind of build on your first point, I think India is a great market where if you face a problem, and unless you're not a very unique person in life and you genuinely face this problem, any problem, then you can be assured that at least 10,000 people also face that. And I'm taking that as a very prudent figure, right? It could be a million people because given the market size of India overall. So that's a great way to kind of look into ideating, right? Either it is a genuine problem that you have that has not been solved properly by others, or if you work in a domain where you've got some real insight based on, say, some clients that you have. Say you're in the PLG SaaS space and you've seen certain clients do certain things wrongly, and you have that insight. So you don't have that problem yourself, but you know that this is something that people face. So these are the two ways to actually start meaningfully ideating. Is what I feel.
Right. Makes sense. On that note, I think Udaan started from a problem that Flipkart was facing, right? Udaan's founders came from a background where they saw that B2B procurement is a problem for Flipkart altogether, and they started out with Udaan. And there are multiple such stories as well. So, and also you have also interacted with multiple founders from Entrepreneur First, from Y Combinator. So have you seen a pattern in which people ideate to formulate a hypothesis or sort of validate a hypothesis in a right way, and which can also help the early stage founders over here?
I think it always starts with a little hunch based on some very empirical objective problem you have seen, right? It could be that there are obviously a lot of cases where people don't have, personal struggle, or like the Udan example where they were so clearly involved in that problem. There could be cases where, I get the sense that Zomato is probably spending too much on delivery. And, I think if I, dig deeper into it, there could be some way where we could have EV bike. This is a very vague example, but it shows that, how maybe a hunch can be strong enough that, you would like to pursue it. And then the only meaningful way to go about it after that, right? Unless you're 100% sure, even if you're 100% sure, the only meaningful way to go from there is to actually talk to the market and actually talk to customers who are your potential market, and very clearly kind of get the insight from them, right? And not just kind of like, what the mistake I made back in EF, and even shortly after that, was I would go to couples, and this is before lunch, and I would tell them that, first I would build myself up big time. Okay, I would say, look at this, I'm such a great, smart guy, and I am building this product to kind of solve this huge investing problem for you. And this is how it's going to look. And I have this Figma wireframe going on. And I show them. And they obviously feel morally obligated to say that, hey, it's a good idea, right? Oh, that makes sense. Because I'll also logically pitch it that way, right? That it kind of makes sense because it's a user interview come like a sales call, right? Which is very bad because they would say, yeah, great idea. But then when we actually go live, they're like, you know what, it's a good idea, but I don't think I need it that bad. Like, it's not that big a problem for me. So the idea then became to kind of, you have a hunch, or you have some surety, and you talk to customers in a very different way, where you're not trying to pitch your product, but you're trying to understand their problem, and very willing to go into that interview or that call thinking that, hey, I may get insight that makes me believe that my product is shit, or that this is not a problem at all. Right. And that's better. Like if I had the Zomato idea and then I go to, Deepinder Goyal and then, or whoever in the company, and then I kind of do the user interview and he says, no, actually, I don't have a problem and this is not for me at all, then it's better for me to know that, right? I may get disappointed early on, but then I won't be wasting my time kind of solve a problem that's not really needs to be solved. So I think that's the hunch plus kind of doing the right kind of user interviews, and many of them is a good idea.
You pointed out a very interesting point. So earlier on, like a month back, someone who joined us at Xartup, they spent almost 3 lakhs in terms of building the product. 3 lakhs is not a big amount, but they were bootstrapping it without any revenue or profits as such. So that way it was challenging. And on top of that, they spent almost 2 years of effort in building that app. It was some kind of a dating site for a particular niche audience, right? And then they figured that people do not even want that kind of audience, do not have the paying ability to sort of monetize from that application. And on the other hand, the volume was also very small.
Yeah.
So that's when I guess what Polygram says in terms of solution in search of a problem, SIST, right? The YC terms, and just recoding those. So that sort of becomes a very big hindrance in those ways. So when you mentioned about your way of validation, right? Can you share some anecdotes? What helped you invalidate some of your hypotheses and sort of build upon some of your hunch that you had in the early days of building Coupl?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think just to kind of add there, we also kind of, we made the same mistakes, right? While today I'm sitting here telling you that this is the kind of smart way to do it, we learned that through not through education, but through like a lot of like screw ups, right? To be very honest. So our early hunch was, couples money management is a problem, right? And that couples manage money together for various things, say saving, spending, etc., etc. And back then we were in this whole save now, buy later kind of wave where we've really felt that for the couples market, they try to secure their future, and therefore a corpus of cash saved up for various goals is very important to them. Right? That was the hunch that we had because we felt that as well. But it was a general feeling. It was not an active problem that we really faced. But we obviously, if I get married, I need to buy a house in 5 years. So I need to save up money for it, right? It logically makes sense. So that's the hunch we actually followed. And because it was so logical per se, we kind of went into user conversations with exactly that. So cut to long story short, to answer your question, we went ahead and kind of launched that whole product, which was investing and saving. But when we realized that we weren't getting the kind of traction that is at bare minimum is expected, when you solve any problem for a user, there's bare minimum traction. Not about we had about 80 KYC users for about 1,000 installation, which is pretty nasty for like early on, right? So then we realized that, this is not about incentivization of kind of users to come and save or give them rewards and all of that. It's about probably we're not solving the right problem. And, a few anecdotes from that were that we would go back to some of the same users that we had, or the users that signed up and didn't do KYC, or other friends that we knew. We could put a LinkedIn post saying that, just give us 15 minutes of your time and get your fingerprints on a product that's great for couples and all of that. And we would ask them very generic, like we would even start asking them that, do you even save together? Or why do you save together? Like, is it meaningful enough? And if we didn't see a great answer about why they save together, right? Because people want to sound smart, they want to give a good answer, right? But if we didn't see a great answer, we know that, hey, this person does not have enough incentive to even save together. Not stuff like, for example, no, because saving is generally good, right? To do with your partner. I'm like, yeah, this person just principally thinks that. This person is not actively trying to do it, right? Whereas when we started asking about spending and expenses and payments, right, we saw that people weren't saying, yeah, it's nice to track expenses. People would say, this is how we existingly do it. We do splitwise, or we do things like we have a WhatsApp group with just the two of us where we kind of, if I buy groceries, I write it there. So we saw that kind of stuff coming out where, hey, people are recognizing this as a problem and they're not saying it's a problem. The fact that they're finding solutions on their own means that, hey, this is probably a problem more than savings is, right? Because savings, we never got a good answer. We did from older couples or from very wealthy couples who say that, yeah, we have an ETF, we have an MF, we have an SIP, and, one more kind of joint thing sounds great. I'm like, okay, cool. You might sign up, but like, how many of you exist in this country, right? Whereas payments was really, we got very, very wild set of solutions that people were doing, like WhatsApp group, Excel, Notion, Splitwise was obvious, or using like one of their partners' third savings account as like one proxy joint account where one person uses a debit card and one person uses the Google Pay that's attached to it. I mean, like it is like, okay, clearly there's something wrong here and clearly something to be solved. So that's one example of that whole validation process.
That shows the depth, right? I'm like, oh my god, the problem is real when you're talking about this
Yeah,
stuff.
exactly.
But how did you cope up with your own biases? Because as founders, we always try to validate our ideas rather than invalidate those, right? Psychologically.
Yeah, no, you see, I'll tell you, to be very frank, it becomes very easy when there's a lot at stake, right? Like, for example, you took the example of somebody who spent 3 lakhs, right? Like, that's no joke. I think when we also started Couple before like EF and all of that, I mean, after EF and kind of in between, we'd also put in about 3 lakhs, which went into all weird stuff like, traveling to Bombay to meet a bank and all of that. But we knew that the tangible amount of that money going, right? So if you take that example, after someone has spent 3 lakhs and kind of built what is not, I would not say wrong product, but let's just say what is not solving the problem that one thought it would solve, or not solving a big enough problem, that's when people get very incentivized that, let me let go of all the biases I have and kind of just really just see what the market wants. Because that's how it was for us as well. We did this savings thing. That was after EF or during EF. Before EF got the demo day, which was about 3 months after the cohort, right? We did that. We got into YC. We realized that, with YC, what we'll do now is the same product. The MVP after EF was very, very basic, right? It was super simple. So when we got into YC, we thought we will make this MVP much prettier, obviously, like very good looking, and we will now scale it because we do performance marketing and this and that partnerships. So that was the idea, right? And that was us just kind of relying on our own biases. And we obviously left we kind of thought of YC as a proxy of a customer, right? That, hey, we validated the idea a little bit with customers. Now YC is investing. So obviously this is a real problem. Like they have done enough research for it, right? But obviously a fund like YC or any big fund, they don't look at it as this is the only reason I'm investing in this company. They must be looking at it as, they may tap into this market and then upsell a credit card to couples, or the market is big, or the founder in the market makes sense. So it's not that they have 100% conviction on only that problem. But we thought, yeah, that's probably what they had. And we just kind of built more on that. But then when we really went live and we saw that we were not able to attract customers and therefore our funding prospects in the future would be problematic, that's when there was no question but to kind of let go of your biases and just build something that actually works, right? Like make something that people actually want, right? Like what IC says, for example. And that became very clear because we would rather run a business that solves a problem than run a very unsuccessful business just because we like the product, right? And that just didn't make sense. And not even like we like the product that much. Like we didn't save that much ourselves with our partners. But the minute like we kind of used this spending product, we're already very actively using it. And this is us as founders. Forget like team and market and stuff like that. Yeah, that was one way.
Yeah, makes sense. And the point that you mentioned, right, around YC becoming the validation rather than customers. In the early days, it sort of happens. We chase investors,
Yeah.
and all of us, folks in the room as well, we chase investors for validation more than customers in the early days when we haven't seen it a lot. So in my case as well, when I was building Juggler, the previous startup into social fitness and all those things, initially we started with reaching out to investors. Hey, this is the pitch deck. This is how it looks. This is the market size. Right? Get convinced. That was internally what was going on. And then eventually we realized that it's been like 6 months and we haven't got a single customer, single validation, and the investors are just keeping on delaying us. And they are just learning from us rather than giving us anything in return. So that's when the aha moment came into the picture, right? After we started talking to customers, and then we realized that okay, we need to tap into the customers' needs rather than the investors' need. And when we tap into the customer's need, then eventually the investors are going to come in because that's how the businesses will get paid. Right. So on that note, moving forward, like how did you sort of scale from your initial validation stage or an MVP stage where you were after Entrepreneur First to sort of getting your initial paying customers, building that product, launching it in the market? To give you a context, almost 35,000 startups died in 2023 without getting a single user, right? That's a huge number. And in your case, how did this happen? Going from 0 users or an MVP to getting your first 1,000 users for that matter.
Okay. So to set some context there about our business model, right, which makes it like there are pros and cons of this, of fintech, of consumer fintech. The cons are a whole list, right, by the RBI, to be very honest, because of a lot of regulation that you have to take part in. But the pro is that we're able to provide a free product to the consumer and we earn like a marketplace like commission model from our so-called suppliers who are our bank, right? So how Coupl makes money, for your reference, is we issue a debit card with two, basically, one to each partner, with each joint account. And when you as a user swipe that card on any market, right, or on any merchant, I'm sorry, then we earn about 1.1% net commission from that transaction value. So let's say in general, when you are to go to a shop and you swipe a card for about 100 rupees, the merchant, who is the shopkeeper, only makes about 98.2 rupees. There's about 1.8 rupees that is cut, called merchant discount rate. And that goes to 3-4 parties, right? It goes to Visa or whoever your RuPay, whoever the network is. It goes to the acquiring bank, who's the machine, and it goes to the main issuing bank. The chunk goes to the issuer of the card, like whoever's card you have. So since we have a co-branding card with our bank partner, we get a chunk of that. So about 1.8% MDR, we make about 1.1. So why I'm giving you this context is that it was easier for us to monetize users. Because the minute a user just transacts and can transact anywhere without us selling anything, right? On a Zepto, for example, we would start making money. So by default, our users itself are paid users. So we call an active user is a user who's done a transaction. And because you've done a transaction, you are by default a paid user, unlike a Canva or a Calendly or a Zoom, where you may be doing transactions or you may be active, but you may not be a paying user, right? So that is the advantage that we had. Now, in terms of our first, by the way, it says my internet is unstable, so please just cut me off in case I cut off. So how we went about in our MVP stage, right? The first 100 were basically just a very manually, a non-scalable way to get users. Just talk to people, ask them to sign up, and we were actually doing it for the wrong reasons back then. We wanted to show traction for the sake of traction, not for any insight from the product, but we were like, you know what? We think we built a great product. We want people to use it because traction will help us in 100 more things, right? Our bank rates, our fundraising, it's easier to hire people when, okay, this is an actively used product, right? Not some random product. So that's the reason why we were going ahead with traction for the sake of traction. And those 100 were very just, I would ask my friends over WhatsApp to just install it and use it and tell me what you think, right? We were doing that feedback seeking, but like pretty much just very manually. So that was early on, right? But when we really went live with our new payments product, this is how we kind of did it. We took it live very, very low key, no launch announcement and all of that. We had a wait list of about 700, 800 people. We sent it to them, of which we got a good conversion, about 500 and something. So they converted, actually signed up, made an account, and slowly started transacting, right? So that was already 500, like kind of immediately. And but we didn't count that yet because consumer fintech, maybe 500 is a smaller number, right? From there, it was pretty much just word of mouth. People who were using the platform were telling others about it. It was typically couples telling other couples, or an older person telling their younger sibling who just gotten married that, hey, you could try this out. It kind of makes sense. Or telling your older sibling, or a father telling their kid, or just couples telling each other that this is a product that made sense to me, and that was the best way for us, because couples anyway have a lot of couple friends. When you get married, you kind of hang out more with couples, and that worked really well in our favor. And also the fact that in consumer fintech, or any fintech, right? It just makes sense to get a word of mouth referral than see an ad, because you're putting real money into a platform. And that was something that was meaningful to us, that people were telling each other. So from there, it was pretty much, right now, about 85% of our active user base is word of mouth. And the rest 15% odd is social media and news and LinkedIn and things like that. But word of mouth mainly, which is why I probably don't know. I don't have the SOP to, like, how do you scale to 10,000 users, because it just kind of happened. So I would just say build a good product and solve a real problem, and probably it'll just scale on its own to some extent. But yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So word of mouth primarily, right? Eventually getting the initial few target customers with the
Yeah.
right targeting, may be from our own network, from our own friends and families, who we know are the right target audience. And then if the product works,
Yes.
then it scales eventually with word of mouth.
Yeah, and I'll just add something there, right? Because this may be a unique case where we gave it to certain specific people who are in our target audience, and then it became word of mouth. So that's also a fair share of luck, I will definitely admit, right? Because maybe that we chose the people who are most likely to tell other people, who are extroverted that way and wanted to kind of show this product, right? And it's not that we were optimizing for people like that. We were just showing it to people, and they thankfully became people who showed it to others, who then became people who showed it to others, right? So that was a bit of luck. But I would say the other strategy that we had before going in, which I think would have also worked fairly well, is if you have a budget of some amount, right? It can be as low as maybe even 50, 60K. It's you may have about 3, 4 target audience groups that you have, right? If I take the example of Couple, there's the married couples market, there's the unmarried couples, and let's say there's the LGBTQ couple who behaves like a couple but is not legally a couple, right? We know that these are the market segments, and we know that these are the 4 or 5 problems that largely they all face. Another strategy that we had was we would run performance marketing ads, right? About 16, 17 ad sets, very low budget. On one ad set is married couples, it's like problem one. Second is LGBTQ couples, it's problem one, and so on and so forth, for all 3 markets with all kind of 4 sets of problems, right? And we have these 16 ad sets. And once we do that, we get a good sense of what has been like the CPI, or like the cost per installation for each of those problem versus market. So we clearly, from numeric data, we get that, hey, unmarried couple who live in tier 1 India, and who are sick of split wire, this is your market, right? Because all of them, kind of all impressions kind of install the app. Now, in reality, not all impressions will install the app, but you get the gist of it, right? Versus, say, LGBTQ couple in tier 2 cities. So we know who the market is, and then we do the organic, non-scalable. We manually go to people who are, hey, live-in couple, unmarried in tier 1, and then we tell them, and we curate marketing for that kind of market itself, right? So that also kind of works well if you're shorter on time and you're not relying a little bit on your kind of luck with word of mouth. But yeah.
Got it. Interesting. So I think I'm getting a few DMs around your Y Combinator story. So let's switch on to that as probably the last segment of our conversation. So how was your Y Combinator application altogether? Because a lot of folks who are in the early stages of building a startup are aspiring to be Y Combinator cohort members, right? Altogether. So if you can give us a sense of how was your experience at YC, how can someone get into YC, what is the application process altogether, and what can help them prepare better for YC?
Okay, the process is actually very simple. It's very simple to understand. It's kind of like EF, right? You have an application form which is very lengthy. You have an interview which is about 10 minutes and about 50 questions, which is something I'll jump into. And then you're kind of done. It's essentially just 2 steps. And in between, sometimes, that if, let's say, you've applied to YC in Jan, and your interview is scheduled for say April, because they take it on a rolling basis, and in April they see your application and they decide to interview you. In that 4 month period, they realize that you have to have done something meaningful with your business, right? So they may have one more kind of stage where they ask you for a progress check, like send us a demo of your product and send us now what your metrics have been from the time of your application, right? So there's another form that kind of pops up where you have your old metrics written in your application and you write the updated one as on date, and they kind of gauge that as well to see how fast the team is. So that's the process. Now, in terms of what gives you an edge, I think one is from a soft skill perspective. I think just keeping the language on the application very, very simple, right? Is very useful because it can land on the lap of any group partner. So all partners will review your application and they review all applications pretty much, right? But they kind of, if your first few questions, which is like describe your business in 50 characters, and what problem are you solving, and maybe what's your solution, they'll largely just read those and they kind of make an impression of this person and of the business, right? They won't get into, like, don't be worried that, I'm not from a good college or I have not worked for too much time, because they'll go to that much later. They will kind of filter you out from the first bit. So keep that very simple to understand, right? For example, when I was filling the application out and I filled one draft and I sent it to a friend of mine who's now like a YC senior from Winter 22, I had written like, we are revolutionizing the joint banking ecosystem in India, which sounds cool, right? But he was like, no, just write neobank for couples in India. I'm like, but this sounds like I'm like dumb, like I don't even know English, right? But like, no, this is what sells. You need to know it's a neobank. You need to know it's for couples. You need to know it's in India. And then problem also, keep it like really, really brief. Like, don't make it for a 5-year-old, but make it for like a 16-year-old who's kind of curious about businesses, but doesn't understand nuanced stuff, right? Now, of course, in YC, there's a lot of jargon on LLMs and AI, right? But if you're not in AI space and where tech is not the only competitive advantage, but like say the way you look at the market or your product itself or your distribution is the advantage, then of course write it very simply. That's the soft skill part. From a really hard skill part, I think easiest way is to have a strong application is one is, I think admittedly this may put off the wrong people, I feel, but you should have a tech co-founder. It helps, right? Or you should kind of know tech, right? There has to be some in-house tech talent outside what is founding team, right? Within the founders itself. So solo founder, I just saw a question right now. Probably this is well down the list, but it says I'm a solo founder and a first time founder. Yeah, that's perfectly fine. But you need to be a coder, which thankfully you are, right? Because if you're not, you could have 3 solid people in the founding team with no coders, and you'll be rejected outright, right? Like if I in my next business apply to YC again, and I apply with another YC batchmate of mine, right, who's also a business founder, we may still have a tough time because they're like, no, who's your, we probably may not, but you get the gist of it, right? So that's important. And also, like, you're solving a real problem. You have spoken enough users. There are a lot of questions about user insight, right? What do you know about your market that your competitor does not? Or what do you know about your users that others don't get? What is an idea that kind of people debate with you on regarding this market, right? I think those questions are not to kind of, for you to show how clever you are, but for you to really show the depth of information you have about your market and about your users' problem. So they know that, hey, this guy's really committed to solving this problem. And needless to say, traction always helps. So if you've done things quickly, then that's great. And traction does not mean like a certain user count. It could simply just mean that I have, I thought of this idea, I spoke to 200 users, and I built an MVP, and I have 10 users in the span of 1 month, right? That shows that this person has worked very quickly. And working quickly is great because it anyway saves you time and like opportunity cost, right? Instead of working for many months. So that way it's good. So speed, having tech within the founding team itself or the founders itself, writing the application very simply so, and needless to say, having some domain experience could obviously put you in better stead, because you personally also, if you were an angel investor, you might be more likely to invest in somebody who is building an insurtech and has worked in insurance for 20 years, right? Versus someone who is not, unless the other person really has some solid insight and solid, user kind of research that he's done. But yeah, this is very uber say. to some extent. So if there are more questions, very happy to answer that as well.
Definitely. Thank you, Srinivas.
Yeah. Any ending note that you would like to wind up this session with?
No, I mean, like, just that. I mean, like, just wishing all of you the best, and it's a great time to start something. I think Shubham has made a great platform, so kudos to you, Shubham. I think this actually sounds great. And stuff that need money, typically like AWS credits, I think Shubham is giving you that, very very helpful. And there are a lot of other communities and grants that give you credits and other things that just make the journey a little easier. And I would absolutely urge a lot of people to look at co-founder matching platforms to find co-founders, and yeah, happy to help in any way I can. You can just talk to Shubham perhaps, and then Shubham, you can correct me as and when required. So yeah,
Definitely.
great meeting all of you.
Awesome. And it was great looking at the concept of Coupl, understanding how you have built this platform. So check out Coupl, folks, and you can share your feedback, go through the platform, and also share with your friends and family in terms of the journey that Coupl has been through and how it can transform the financial management for couples, maybe with your partners and with your friends. So
No,
great talking to
absolutely.
you.
Please use Coupl. Please use Coupl as a favor to me for this session. And if you have any feedback, just reach me directly. You can have Shubham give you my email. But yeah, thanks a lot, guys. It was great speaking to you.
Thank you, Srinivas. Nice talking to you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Srinivas.